Hi Daily 4th graders. Right now we're going to discuss math lesson 538, which is about finding the product of a whole number and a mixed number using the distributive property. Now we started going over this on last lesson, 537. If you haven't watched that lesson yet and completed the activities, then do that first before continuing. So before we kind of dive in to trying a problem on our own, which you're going to do on Padlet, I want you guys to take a look at this problem. Now, this problem is using the distributive property. However, there are some numbers that are missing. I would like for you to pause the video, and I want you to think what numbers should go in those spaces. We have 5 times 8 1/2, and then we see two different groupings. A number times 8 plus a number times 1/2. Pause the video for a moment and think to yourself, what number should go in the blanks? So friends, with the distributive property, we are multiplying this number by the two parts that we see here, which a lot of you do that in your head to begin with, and you didn't even know you're using the distributive property. So 5 times 8 1/2 is the same as saying 5 times 8 plus 5 times 1/2. So real quick, I'm going to fill that into my problem. We have 5 times 8 plus 5 times 1/2. Alrighty, then using the distributive property helps us to break apart this number, so it's a little easier to multiply. So 5 times 8 is, you're right, it's 40. So we know that we are adding together 40 plus, and then 5 times 1/2. Remember, 5 times 1/2 would look like this. 5 times 1/2. So that would give us 5 halves. 40 plus 5 halves. Now we need to break 5 halves into a mixed fraction. So I want you to do that real quick. Do it on your own first before we go over it together. So pause the video real quick, and I want you to find your final answer, making 5 halves into a mixed fraction and then adding it together. Pause the video. Alrighty, so to go over the work, again, we had 5 times 8 is 40. We're adding it to 5 times 1/2, which is 5 halves. 5 halves, we think about how many wholes are there in 5, our unit being 2. So the closest multiple of 2 to 5 would be 4. So 4 halves, that would be 2 wholes. So we'll write we have 4 halves and then 1/2. 4 halves is the same as 2. So I'm just going to write here 2. So we're adding 40 plus 2 and 1/2. 40, let me turn around a little bit, perfect. 40 plus 2 1/2, which is going to give us 42 1/2. So this is one way that we can solve a multiplication problem involving a whole number and a mixed number, using, again, the distributive property. And I would love for you to experiment with the distributive property. So like I said, a lot of you use this in your head and you don't even know it, which is pretty cool. Can you think of another way that we could solve other than the distributive property? What other ways could we solve for 5 times 8 1/2 other than using the distributive property? Well, we know that multiplication is the same as repeated what? The same as repeated addition. You could simply add 8 1/2 together 5 times. You could do that just with numbers. You could also draw a tape diagram. So 5 times 8 1/2. I would like for you Now that we've used the distributive property, I want you to use a tape diagram to help you solve 5 times 8 1/2. And this might not be the way that you would normally solve, but as mathematicians, it's so important to know how to use visual models as well as numbers to solve problems. So I would like for you to draw on your whiteboard a tape diagram to represent 5 times 8 1/2. I'm going to draw mine as you are drawing yours. And you might need to pause the video so that you have a little bit more time, because I usually draw pretty fast. Ooh, I'm barely fitting it on here. Alrighty. So here's our tape diagram. I showed 5 copies of 8 1/2 all together there. And then I know that I can add together my 8s first. 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 will give me 40. And then I can add together all of my 1/2s. Alrighty, so I know 5 copies of 8 would give me 40. And then I have 5 copies of 1/2. I can simply, if I wanted to, I could skip count by halves. 1/2, 1 whole, 1 1/2, 2 wholes, 2 1/2. So 40 plus 2 1/2 would give us 42 1/2. Alrighty, friends. So what you're going to do to practice this, on Padlet, you will find a word problem about Mr. Davenport. And you guys are going to solve it using any strategy that you would like. You might use a distributive property, you might use repeated addition, you might use a tape diagram, and who knows, maybe you have another way of solving that we didn't talk about. So what we're going to do, in class before we have done gallery walks, which we can't do a physical gallery walk, but we're essentially going to do a virtual gallery walk. So you're going to solve the problem in any way that you would like. I would like for you to take a picture of you solving the problem. So we're not going to do a video. We're not going to do a podcast. We're going to show our work on paper. And it's really important that you take a really clear picture to post on Padlet so that other friends can read it really clearly. Alrighty. I guess, if you did do a video, I suppose that could be fine if you, kind of like I do, if you hold the picture up in front of the camera and then explain it, I suppose that would be fine. We just want to be able to see your work very clearly. Alrighty. And then for the gallery walk, you will look at everybody's work. You will comment, did you solve the same way? Did you solve differently? What did you notice about their work? Maybe you catch an error and you want to offer a suggestion. Always using kind words and being supportive mathematicians. Alrighty, you guys. So the link to the Padlet is going to be below this video. Please rewatch the video if you need some help. You could also watch the video from yesterday, 5:37. Alright, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.